Thank you. We are recording the beginning part of our presentation today. We will turn the recording off during discussion. But before we get started, I just wanted to give a shout out to our interpreters, American Sign Language interpreters, Emily, Cassie, and Hannah, who will be providing their services today during the meeting. So thank you so much for your help today. And also wanted to just let you know that if you, like me, if you like to have closed captioning on during a Zoom meeting, you can do this in the navigation menu where you would click Settings, the Meeting tab, and then Advanced. And that's where you can click on automated captions to enable or disable. Hopefully we will all speak clearly enough to get as accurate captions as possible. We are going to ask to just cut down on distractions and background noise to keep yourself muted until the large group discussion at the end, and only unmute when you are speaking. And if you feel comfortable and you have good bandwidth, we always encourage you to keep your camera on so we can see each other, but it's not necessary. We understand some people have to eat lunch during this presentation. I wanted to introduce our team real quick, especially for those of you who are new to the community of practice. We are Jackie Lomore and myself, Roberta Burns, and Brittany Ray. We are the co-facilitators for the community of practice. And I'll just introduce myself real quick. I'm an environmental scientist advisor and environmental educator for the Kentucky Division for Air Quality. I have been with KAEE since the early 2000s and have served as co-facilitator of the group since its beginning. And my JEDI journey began during the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. I'm going to pass the baton to introduce yourselves to Jackie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Lamore. I'm a K-4 science teacher at Sayre in Lexington, and I'm currently on the KAE board as the secretary. And my journey... Oh, I thought I heard something. Sorry. My JEDI journey started also during the Black Lives Matter movement in probably 2020. So I've been working with KAE on this since I've been on the board. We had an action team that the board started, and then this COP came out of that action team. So I guess it's probably been maybe 2.5 years since I've been working on this. So
since the very beginning, yeah.
And I'll pass it to Brittany.
Yeah, I am Brittany Ray. I'm the Deputy Director for KAEE. I have been with KAEE since 2016. And my JEDI journey really began when I started with KAEE way back then. And then, of course, it was sort of thrust into overdrive during the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020. So I'm glad to be here with you all today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great. And we're going to start this meeting today with a land acknowledgement. Some of you may have seen land acknowledgements in other meetings. We'd like to acknowledge the lands upon which we are meeting today, which are in Kentucky, the ancestral and unceded territories of the Yuchi, Osage, Shawnee, and Cherokee peoples. I invite you to learn more about the original stewards and caretakers of the land you call home at Native Land Digital, and their website is the word native-land.ca. And let's just look at what we're going to be doing today. On the agenda, Jackie's going to just do a reminder about essentially what the vision and learning pathways are for our community of practice. She's going to review some of the updates to the community of practice for this year. based on our experiences in the past year. And then finally, we get to the good stuff. We get to our guest speaker, John Pollpeter. And after he is finished talking, we'll have some time for questions and a brief discussion before we wrap it all up.
Thank you, Roberta. So our vision for this community of practice is truly a place of learning, and we hope to foster practices of racial justice, equity, inclusion, and diversity. We have also tried to include other aspects of diversity based on feedback that that we've gotten from the last year. And we do focus somewhat specifically in outdoor and environmental work. So our pathways include increasing our vocabulary. We believe that using the right language is really important and makes a difference. Engaging across human differences in a manner that honor and values agreeing and disagreeing, right? And then embracing our overall racial diversity and belonging journey. So we ask things like, be present, we're all learning, assume good intentions, those sorts of things. So here's some of the updates we've been doing this for about a year and a half. And after the first year, we did a survey of participants. And based on that feedback, we made some changes for this year. So many people really preferred guest speakers rather than having homework, maybe watching a video and then discussing. So we've been having guest speakers for this year, which has been wonderful. We have a new meeting time, which we hope is more accessible to people. It does seem that way because we're getting more participation. We also shortened the meeting length from an hour and a half to an hour. We don't have homework anymore, which, I mean, I loved the homework as a teacher, but I get it. And we also, like I said, incorporated other facets of JEDI. So I'm really excited to hear John talk today, actually. We have a new sign-up method, thanks to Brittany. She's really a guru on the technology. And we did start recording guest speakers. Originally, we weren't doing any recording because we wanted to make sure that everyone felt comfortable sharing. But we decided, since we had a request, and decided that it was reasonable to record the guest speakers, just not the discussion. And I'll turn it over to Ashley to introduce our guest speaker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley. I'm the director of KAEE, and I've had the honor of working with John for probably the past decade now. I used to live over in Western Kentucky, so I got to see him more at the nature station before I moved to the center part of the state. But John is the lead naturalist and manages the Woodlands Nature Station over at Land Between the Lakes, which is a pretty big reserve over there. And they have some really cool different wildlife species if you've never been able to get out there, including some red wolves that they just birthed last year, which is really exciting. And John's done some really great work there. They get about 45,000 visitors a year. And so John's going to talk to us about accessibility and how he's been able to adapt that for himself as well as for visitors at their nature station. So I'm going to turn it over to John. And John, you're muted. So.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley and Brittany and everybody on, well, I'm going to say JEDI Council, but 8-year-old of me is very excited to talk to a bunch of JEDIs. So I think Brittany's bringing up my PowerPoint, and this will be the only reference that I will make about JEDIs because I don't want any eye rolling. But one of the more common phrases that we use over here and a lot of the stuff that we sell in the gift store is "May the Force be with you." And the JEDI that's presented on my opening slide there was in Rogue One and was a blind JEDI, and I kind of affiliated with him because I am also blind, and I kind of liked having that representation in the Star Wars movies. I thought he was a great character. So if you're not familiar with me, I've worked with some of you in the past, like Ashley and Roberta. Roberta came and helped us with a homeschool day a few years ago, and I'm the lead naturalist at the Woodlands Nature Station here at Land Between the Lakes, and I've been here for a quarter of a century almost, a little bit over than that. So next. We're on slide 2. Yeah. So Land Between Lakes, if you're not familiar with it, if you've never been out to far western Kentucky, it is a plot of land of about 170,000 acres, surrounded by 2 large rivers, the Cumberland and the Tennessee on the west. It's mainly eastern deciduous forests. The Tennessee River is considered the Amazon of North America. With all the biodiversity that we have there, it is managed by the USDA Forest Service. So a federal agency. Previously, it was with the TVA, and prior to that, it was private ownership, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So it's had a lot of different people associated with it throughout the ages, and it has a lot of history behind it. We'll kind of talk about that as we go on. Next. So I work at the Woodlands Nature Station, which is the main natural history location that you're going to find at Land Between the Lakes. We're found in the northeast corner of Land Between the Lakes, in what's known as the Woodlands Nature Watch area. About 7,000 acres of that 170,000 acres is geared towards being managed for wildlife viewability and wildlife viewing accessibility. So if you want to go for some good day hikes and do some birding, some wildflowers, you want to get out on a kayak, the area that surrounds the nature center is the best, has the most ability to please people when we're looking for certain things like that. The nature center is in the middle. It actually was, the building itself was once Kentucky Woodlands National Wildlife Refuge, one of the first wildlife refuges in the country, 1937 by Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was former strip mine area. We are right, Land Between Lakes had a large surface iron ore industry in the 19th century and into the 20th century. As most things go, went boom and bust, and that land was turned over to the state and the federal government. That's where the Kentucky Woodlands came about. So a lot of the infrastructure that's associated with the nature station, unfortunately, is quite old and has had to be modified for accessibility. Some of the things that we're kind of known for, because we are off the main path, is we got some great hiking trails, some recreational lakes. We have 55 native rescued wildlife species, including my favorites, the critically endangered red wolves. The only 2 red wolves that you're going to find in the entire state of Kentucky are here at Land Between Lakes. This past winter, I got shipped and transferred 4 puppies to different facilities all across the country, and they are now starting their own packs. And we will see here in a month if they were successful, if they started having babies of their own. We're also famous for our hummingbirds. We're on the migratory route for the ruby-throated hummingbird, and so during the summer, we'll get close to 250 hummingbirds per day. All right, next. Let's talk to you about me a little bit. I grew up in small town, rural Iowa. I have always loved the outdoors. I've always loved wildlife. I've always loved animals. I sometimes say that I was genetically inclined to do this job. And I went to Iowa State University and got a degree in fisheries and wildlife. Very proud of my fellow Iowan, Caitlin Clark. She had a great season, so I'm a big 22 fan. But then, fortunate thing about my state, and I wish it was different, it is the #1 state in the country for private land, which means there is very little public accessible land in the state of Iowa. Really no federal, and I think Barack Obama did put in a national park, a small one, but we do not, my state does not have a lot of places for conservation due to the farming and agriculture economy. So when you want to go into conservation, you got to move out. And so I moved down here to Kentucky and got a job at Land Between Lakes in 1997, about 28 years ago. Okay, next. So one of the things about me when I was 16 years old, I had just got my driver's license, really excited. I was active in sports. It was looking like I was going to get my dad's truck. I was looking forward to being able to hang out with my peers. And the driver's education person noted to my parents that he just doesn't seem to have peripheral vision. So I went and got a specialist to take a look at me, a retinitis, and we did a bunch of tests. And the first question when the doctor came in to talk to me and my parents about my eye condition was, "Can you see the stars?" And the answer was no, I could not. I might have been able to see a planet, maybe a satellite or a plane, maybe the North Star, but I had no idea. When people would talk about a field of stars, I had no idea. And that was the first indication that I have a problem, that I was different. I have a disease or a disorder called retinitis pigmentosa, which is a type of blindness that's actually very common in the United States. And it's basically a macular degeneration that starts in teenagehood and can advance over time. Usually people with condition, RP, which is known for, don't necessarily go all the way blind, but they do lose quite a bit of their eyesight. For me, I lost the peripheral side of my vision first, so I was very fortunate. That means the rods in my eyes. So night vision, side vision was gone. And then it started to focus on my central vision in my 30s. They say I probably have less than 5% of my vision left. So I don't see all that much. I still have some vision, and my brain kind of compensates for those missing pieces. But sometimes it's hard for me to see faces. I definitely can't read without some visual aids. A lot of times in nature, I don't see the bird that I hear calling, or the snake on the ground, or maybe even the butterfly that's sitting on the flower. So I had to do things a little bit differently. So, and it's definitely been a challenge in my career. But sometimes you got to take a disadvantage and make it an advantage. So that's what I've tried to do here at the Woodlands Nature Station. Okay, next slide. So I the kind of focus on some of the aspects of this, the JEDI, the justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion. I'm going to kind of talk about 4 different programs, but first of all, just to kind of lay it out, what kind of facility I work at. I work for the USD Forest Service. I'm not actually a federal employee. I work for the Friends of Land Between the Lakes, which is a nonprofit organization that basically all the interpretive services, volunteer services, guest services, and information services, the people portion of Land Between Lakes, has been outsourced to the nonprofit. This is started in 2000, and it's become more and more common in the federal system. But being part of that joint venture, we have a lot of obligations to follow many of the guidelines that the Forest Service and the federal government set. So in hiring and equal opportunity for employees, and diversity and inclusion, Friends of Land Between Lakes tries to do that. So it's pretty equivalent to the federal government system. What I'd like to do next is talk about 4 particular programs that I kind of set out that I'm kind of proud of, that fall in the line, and maybe ideas that you guys can adopt. Maybe you guys already have stuff in place that's similar, but it's stuff that has worked here to accomplish many of the goals of DEI or JEDI. And the first one is our school field grant program, which is something I'm not necessarily responsible for, but I definitely see the results of. So the Woodlands Nature Station does get between 45 to 55,000 visitors per year. About 10,000 of them can be students from the local communities, usually about the local 19 counties that surround the Land Between Lakes area. And what the Friends of Land Between Lakes does in cooperation with the Forest Service is it fundraises for this school grant program. And it basically serves 2 different groups of people can apply for this grant. It pays for their visit to Land Between Lakes. One of the #1 goals for the Forest Service is to get more kids into the woods. And this helps accomplish that goal. So this grant, so teachers can apply for these grants. And there are 2 different categories that they can apply. They can apply if they've never been to Land Between Lakes before, and they have a good shot of being accepted into the grant system. And then the other is if they have a high percentage of free lunches. So usually schools that have a higher end of kids with lower income means, and and maybe not have the opportunity to come to a natural area. Last year, the field grant program had about 3,000 students come, as we're just coming out of COVID, so it's just rebuilding those capabilities. But 72% of the students that were served were kids with a high level of free lunches, and we were able to serve quite a few different kinds of kids all throughout the Land Between Lakes region. But it can go stretches as far as Nashville, Memphis, Evansville, Paducah, Hopkinsville. Definitely are some different schools that we get that take advantage of this program and brings these students in, and they can go not just to the Woodlands Nature Station and be able to experience a nature hike or a pond prowl, or maybe get to see an owl up close, but they can go to the Elk and Bison Prairie, the Golden Pond Planetarium, our 1850s home place, which is our cultural history site, or they can stay overnight for a whole weekend or even a week at the Brandon Spring Group Center, which is an environmental education center that is a little bit more immersive for them overnight. And and that's what this grant helps make possible for them to be able to attend. Okay, go ahead next. The reason I bring up the grant program is because one of my things that I have been very involved with, that I have fallen in love with, is being able to partner with the Kentucky Department for the Blind and 19 school districts that surround Land Between Lakes on what we call Visionary Day. We've done this about 5 to 6 times, partnering with them. And the idea for the Kentucky Department of the Blind, as well as the school districts, is to bring students that have visual disabilities or have problems with eyesight, and bring them to a group place where they can all gather up and see other kids, meet other kids that have those similar problems. There may be only one kid that has a visual disability in a school system or a particular grade, and they come out and they enjoy some environmental education programming. We've done things like fishing, we've done campfire cooking, we've done nature hikes where they got to meet animals, but also being partners with these organizations, they take advantage and they do things like introduce kids to different kinds of technology or resources to the parents that come with them. They may be able to meet other professionals, and that was one of the reasons why they kind of selected Land Between Lakes, because not only were they able to take advantage of the school field grant program, but also they had 2 individuals, professionals that had vision disabilities here at Land Between Lakes. Me, that runs the nature station, and another guy at West Smalley who is a interpreter at home. And so when I was 17 and still trying to deal with my eyesight loss, or the fact that I would not be able to do the things that I wanted to do, they had a very similar thing, a conference where I got to meet other kids, other blind kids, and I got to meet other professionals that were successful in this field. And one of the things that's very difficult, especially when you're a child and you're facing disability, is not to go down the road of pessimism, not to become cynical, and it's hard. It's hard not to fight a depression, and that's a common goal that both I had, the Kentucky Department of the Blind, and the school districts was try to have optimism versus pessimism. So if we can go to the next slide. All right, so I was the keynote speaker at all these things, trying to showcase that to take advantage of resources to help yourself, that you can still follow your dreams, that you can still be a professional, even though you have some extra hurdles to go across. So one of the things that I did in my keynote speaking is I had to talk about nature, I had to talk about optimism, and I had to talk about blindness. So I came up with this activity that I did with the kids, and I did not show them a slide with different pictures on there. Of course, I wasn't that insensitive since I can't even see it myself. But what I did, I bought plastic models of each of these different 5 animals, and I passed them along so that they can feel and try to identify them. And then I asked the question, and I'm going to ask the group now, what do all 5 of these animals have in common? So take a second, try to guess what you think they have in common. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Somebody said they all have eyes.
They all have backbones. They're all vertebrates.
They all have teeth.
Okay, yep. What else?
They're all pretty large.
That's a good one, right?
They are all top of their ecological niches.
Oh, that's good. Yep. You got two of the three.
Apex.
You got two of the three.
Mammals.
Nope, not the T-Rex. I'll help you out. So the idea behind this was that in nature, you do not have to have great eyesight to be successful. All these animals have been very, very successful. Maybe they're an apex predator like the sperm whale, the T-Rex, or they've grown so large that there's not very many animals that would bother them, like the rhino or the elephant. The grizzly bear obviously is an apex predator. All of them have poor eyesight. They do not depend on their eyesight as their main sense. So they are successful even though they have little or very poor eyesight. I myself feel very tied to the rhino. I always joke with my staff that, I'm like the rhino, and I have poor eyes, great sense of smell, great sense of hearing. I have thick skin, but I'm easy to irritate. So I think that hit home with a lot of the students. It was able to make that kind of connection with them. And I was hoping that they could leave the nature station with that optimistic feel. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Apprentices, is that correct? Apprentices?
Yes, that's it. Apprentice program.
So this is not a new idea, obviously. Everybody has maybe an apprentice or an intern program. I know that KAEE is very involved in AmeriCorps. I actually started my career with an AmeriCorps job, but it got canceled by federal cutbacks. So I had to move to this other place called Land Between the Lakes, and it kind of worked out for me there. But I credit that apprenticeship as one of the most important things for me. And I kind of come at it maybe a different angle when it comes to DEI, maybe JEDI kind of principles, in that for me, the apprentice program and why it was important was when you looked at me on paper or when you interviewed me in a job interview, I did pretty good. I usually got the job that I wanted. The problem was I didn't feel comfortable enough that I could do the job when I got the research. I had to turn a lot of jobs down because I felt, I didn't want to make that commitment and then be disappointed. When I got the apprenticeship for Land Between Lakes, I felt like, that I wasn't really making a hard commitment and they weren't really dependent upon me, that I had an opportunity to try it out to see if I can do environmental education. And environmental education, I went into environmental education because of my eyesight. I felt I could do that job. And this apprenticeship gave me that position. And I feel like that also helps with a number of other groups. So you see on the screen, there is an Asian woman on there. Her name is Winnie Lo. She was an international student from Taiwan, one of my favorite apprentices that I've ever had. Still keep in touch with her today. And she was learning English while she was over here, while she was studying outdoor recreation. And we had her as an apprentice because we had that ability to give her a shot and see how well she did. And she was wonderful. She was able to do programs and make people laugh. Not only, even though English was not her majority language, but in that language. And she was excellent. Everybody really loved her. That apprenticeship gave her that chance because she did not have to feel that pressure of commitment. That also has happened a number of times with us, with non-traditional students, people who have gone back to school or have tried to change their career. Maybe all their life they wanted to be a naturalist, work with animals, or be in the outdoors. They got to 50 and they're just like, now's my shot. And then that apprenticeship gave that to them. I do also find this to be pretty common with other folks that have had disabilities. I've had hearing loss folks. I've had a lot of folks with neurodivergence that want to see if they can be successful. And go ahead to the next slide. And with that, one of the phrases that I've learned and we've adopted my entire time here, and that when I came here, was the phrase free to fail. I love this phrase. I make sure that this phrase is the top of my training for everybody that comes in, whether they are full-time or they're an apprentice or an intern. I want them to have that attitude that it's okay to try something. It's okay not to be successful. You're going to learn a lot more from failures than you are from successes. You have to learn. And that is a philosophy that we've definitely adopted, and especially for that apprentice program. It's something that I've tried to make sure it happens here. And that gives some of those people that relaxation, and they're willing to try new things and gain that confidence. Let's go to the fourth one, the next slide, I'm sorry. So this follows a little bit more into DEI, and it's a program that I've been doing a little bit more recently. I love this program. It's a little bit out of our normal way of doing program. Most of our programming that we do at the Woodlands Nature Station is, of course, natural history. It dips into cultural history. So climate change has impacted our programming here at Land Between the Lakes. When I first started, we were able to do wildlife viewing tours all throughout the entire winter, December, January, February. And Land Between Lakes is a hot spot for wildlife viewing during the month of January. It's our second best month to see wildlife if you want to come out and see wildlife. Oddly enough, if you want to see one of our armadillos, January is the best month to come see an armadillo. But as climate change has advanced, especially over the last couple of decades, many of the species that would have been here in February when we did those tours have started moving north. Warmer weather means that they're going to go further north, and we aren't able to do eagle tours or pelican tours or some of the other things. It also means that many of the back road areas are now open to us, and they're not going to be too dangerous to get stuck in. So we started doing something called road less travel. And it was taking anybody that wanted to go into some of the back road areas of Land Between Lakes and try to show some significant parts of the history and the more inclusive history of Land Between Lakes. Particularly, I'll give you one example. So in there, you see like an eagle nest. You see an old silo that was that's in the woods there from 1939, and then you see a gentleman there. That gentleman there, I think, is worth knowing about. His name is Andrew Jackson Smith, and he was born a slave. He was born a slave in the north part of Land Between the Lakes. During his time as a slave, he ran away. He ran away just around the Civil War and ran into Illinois to the Underground Railroad that was possibly around this area. And he ran to the Union Army. And he became the assistant to a very high-profile general up there in Illinois. During the Battle of Shiloh, which takes place in the Tennessee-Mississippi border, that general's horse was shot during the middle of the battle. And Andrew Jackson Smith rushed in to give his general a new horse so that he can continue on. But during that time period, both him, Andrew Jackson Smith, as well as the general, were shot and wounded. They escaped the battle and were able to survive, but that bravery was noted. That did not stop Andrew Jackson Smith. From there, he rejoined the Union Army as part of a Black regiment. You may have heard of the Massachusetts 54th, which is the first Black regiment. It was portrayed in the movie Glory with Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington, a fantastic movie. And he was part of the second regiment. So he was in the Massachusetts 55th. And he fought in South Carolina, like the 54th did, but in a different battle. I think it was called Honey Hill. During that time period, the Union soldiers were being routed, and Andrew Jackson Smith helped rally them by marching forward, grabbing the flag, the Union flag that had fallen, and rushing forward and eventually winning the battle. Disappeared from history, unfortunately. In the 90s, President Clinton awarded him the Congressional Medal of Honor. And this man is buried at Land Between the Lakes. A bridge is now named after him. And to me, I'm just like, why do we not know this man's name? Why do we not know more about him? And we on this tour, we started taking people to some of these spots, like Andrew Jackson Smith's grave. And the comment that you see up there, you see there were slaves here. It stuck with me and made me feel justified in saying that these programs are important. These stories are important to be able to tell. And so we've incorporated a lot of these types of stories that you might not get on a standard tour because they've got hidden by history. Andrew Jackson Smith, Trail of Tears. Now we're all familiar with the Forced March, but before the Forced March that went through Hopkinsville in Livingston County later on, there were 2 to 3 other flotillas that came down the Tennessee River along the western side of Land Between the Lakes, and they camped out there. As they moved closer to Oklahoma. These are some of the stories that I want to include in these tours because I want these stories. I don't necessarily want to tell these other people's stories, but I want them to know that these stories exist. And we've had a very positive response to this. You had talked about a land acknowledgement statement. We definitely do a most of the programs, it's hard to do a land acknowledgement statement, during a possum program. But this one is particularly important that we do that land acknowledgement statement because it is talking about other people's histories, other people's history here at Land Between Lakes. And it's been very important for me to be able to continue these and be able to continue these stories. And that kind of gives you an example of some of the things that we've done. Last slide, please. And kind of to conclude with my talk before I open up to questions, the thing that I've learned since I've worked at the Woodlands Nature Station and had to make decisions about accessibility, about different people, is that when you invest in someone, the results may happen that it helps everyone. And I think the classic example of making an accommodation for one makes accommodations for others is the cut curb effect. So you cut a curb so that somebody that is in a wheelchair has accessibility into a building, onto a sidewalk, off a road. But that also helps the workmen with the dolly and the heavy load. Helps my grandfather who has some walking issues, mobility issues. It helps the parent with the stroller. It even helps the kid with the bike and obviously skateboard too. And I like this graphic because it kind of portrays that. And I kind of give you another example that's a little bit more towards me is I love to travel. I travel with my wife quite a bit. And one of the things that's always been very difficult for me, especially with my vision, is when I go to an airport or a large place with a lot of people, they have these large bathrooms, say a sports arena or a concert. And it's very difficult for me as a blind person to go into the men's restroom. Let's take an airport, for instance. There's a lot of moving men in there. There's a lot of urinals all round up. The design is never the same in any particular airport. It's usually bright white. It has a lot of lighting. It's very difficult for me. There's carts everywhere, so easy to trip. And I stumble and I bumble and I don't feel very dignified. And I feel very, nobody can go in and really help me. I do have to sometimes ask for help, but it is a very complicated problem. To the point that I would dehydrate myself and not drink anything. So that I would just be able to hold it 6, 7, 8 hours if I had to. Now you start seeing one of the things I've noticed in airports and large concert places is family bathrooms. And that might be an old idea and I just now noticed it, but boy, that's revolutionized my world. And I got to thinking about this with accommodation, like the cut curb effect. It's the same thing with the family bathroom. That helps the dad who has a little girl that he doesn't want to send in the bathroom alone, or the mom with the little boy has to go into the men's room by himself. Helps the parent with the baby that needs to be changed, or somebody that has elderly parents maybe, or that just needs a little extra help. Obviously, it helps people with handicaps, disabilities. So when we make an accommodation for one, we may not know that we're making accommodations for others. And so when we're making those decisions for accessibility, when we're making those decisions whether we should invest in this, my answer is yes, it is worth it, because you don't know how you're going to help other people. And the Forest Service has been very good in making making lemonade out of lemons, here with some of our old infrastructure as best as we can, as well as the Friends of Lamington Lakes. And I've been very fortunate that they've been very accommodating towards me and many of the others like me here at Lamington Lakes. Thank you. I can answer any questions that you guys might have. I'd be happy to do so.